Supreme Court met today. A bunch of people are talking about it, but these are legal matters, therefore they go way over my uneducated head. So we better bring in someone who knows what they're talking about. And that brings us to Alex Swoyer, author of a wonderful book, Lawless Lawfare. She's a reporter for the Washington Times. Okay, Alex, first and foremost, who's Scrimeti and why do I need to know this person?
You need to know this person because he's the Attorney General of Tennessee, and he went to the Supreme Court earlier this year defending a state law that basically says youth that are looking to transition cannot have puberty blockers, they cannot have surgery. The goal of the state was really to protect youth from the unknown of the long-term effect of this types of drugs. And that was met by challenges. The state law was met by challenges from three transgender youth and their family and a doctor, basically saying that that type of law violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution and that it's sex discrimination. So, during oral arguments, which I will say was the most attended oral arguments of the term, going back to COVID before the audio was released live, usually the courtroom was packed, but now not so much since people can listen to it remote. But this one drew all the attention for the term. And it did seem like the AG, the Tennessee AG, had a better day in court. So I wasn't all that surprised with today's ruling, which basically upheld the state law in a 6-3 decision and said, yes, the state of Tennessee can have this law. It's not sex discrimination according to the majority. They're saying this law is looking at age. It goes by age, that there are these medical treatments available to adults. And, also the fact that uh, the treatment is based off of a gender dysphoria, the actual diagnosis. So, children can still get puberty blockers when appropriate, but not to treat gender dysphoria. The dissent, the three Democratic appointees dissented from the ruling, saying that this puts transgender youth in danger, that they could have high rates of anxiety and suicide from this. So they were very disappointed with the way the court went. What they wanted was the court to send this back to lower courts and say that the state had to meet a higher burden, essentially an intermediate scrutiny showing why it was justified in passing this type of law.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about a federal judge blocking Trump's order mandating biological sex on passports. I can't believe we even have to fight things like this in this wacko country of ours now, but this is surely going to get shot down, right?
Yes, I foresee it will get shot down on appeal. The judge has made this now a class action. We are frequently seeing Biden appointees like this issue these nationwide injunctions or temporary restraining orders, that is, looking to strike down policies. So, this was a policy out of the State Department saying that we recognize biological sex, no more X on your passport. You could see that there's a national you could see there's a national security reason for that. So I do believe that as this works its way up the chain, courts will rule for the administration. They typically do defer to the executive when it comes to matters of national security. And when needing to identify someone coming into this country, it would be helpful to know if there's a male or female, not just an X, for identification.
Yeah, it certainly would. Okay, so the culture war stuff. The Supreme Court, especially our side, has been much maligned and justifiably so for all the ways they've screwed things up. But they appear to be pretty solid on the cultural issues that keep landing in front of them. Am I wrong?
You are not wrong. They have this 6-3 majority, and with the exception of really, we're not always sure where Roberts and Barrett will go, but for the most part, they have been delivering wins for conservatives. Now, I'm not sure, in the next biggest case we're waiting for this term, it's really the birthright citizenship case. And for your audience, basically, the case was about President Trump's move to end birthright citizenship. And that's really when a child is born on US soil, but the parents are not US citizens. That child is then given US citizenship. And the president has looked to end that. That was challenged and it was blocked, unsurprisingly, nationwide. And that's really the issue that the court took up. The Supreme Court is weighing whether these lower court judges have the ability to basically have a sweeping injunction that blocks the executive policy nationwide, rather than just for the parties that brought that case to the district court or in the jurisdiction in which it's brought. There are some concerns, obviously, when we're talking about matters like immigration, having fractured court opinions, and the idea that there needs to be some uniformity in how they're enforced. But which court that should be left up to, I think, is where the justices need to direct that opinion. Maybe provide these lower court judges with a test about when it is appropriate to issue such a sweeping nationwide injunction. So I think that might be the type of guidance we get from them in the next week or so.
Okay, Alex, so forgive my stupid question, but you're dealing with the uneducated here. It doesn't sound to me like you're talking about the Supreme Court actually ruling on birthright citizenship or not. That doesn't sound like what they're going to rule on, so we're all getting ourselves worked up into a tizzy over nothing.
That is true. It is the Supreme Court. So could they say something about birthright citizenship? Sure. But the issue they actually took up out of the petition of this case was centered on the issue of nationwide injunctions and if these district courts have the ability to issue them. So what we're really waiting on is guidance in that respect, which is a bit more procedural than the actual merits of what you just mentioned. Can the president end birthright citizenship?
Okay, Alex, finally, the FBI leaker. Everybody remembers the Dobbs decision was leaked beforehand, and then the animals took to the streets and death threats and assassination attempts and all the things we've grown used to in this country. Did the FBI ever track that person down, or is he hiding right next to the pipe bomber from January 6th?
Yeah, might be hiding. I think you're right on that. I think the
Yeah.
reason the court didn't invite the FBI in to do a thorough investigation there was the thought of wanting to keep the executive branch agencies out of the judiciary, for better or worse. I think a lot of people want some sort of accountability there. It was such a grave mistake, and it has, I think, continued to deteriorate the trust in the judiciary and made it look all that more political. That's something I get into in my book, Lawless Lawfare, about the loss of the trust in the court system. It's looking more and more like political battlefields than a courtroom.
No, no doubt. Alex, best of luck. Hope your book does well. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.